The film begins with a horrifying and tragic scene on a silent lake. A woman, in an act of desperation, slowly enters the water while holding her baby in her arms. As she wades deeper, her husband, alarmed and panicked, rushes toward her, shouting for her to stop. However, he arrives too late, and the woman disappears beneath the surface of the water as the screen darkens, leaving viewers with a sense of dread. This impactful opening sets a dark tone for the unfolding narrative. The plot then jumps forward several years to introduce Matthias, a social media influencer who has moved to the countryside with his partner Liv and their newborn Julius. The house where the family settles belonged to Matthias's father, Paul, and is located near the same lake where the film's initial tragedy occurred. Matthias and Liv had lived in the city, but he felt suffocated by the constant pressure and chaotic noise of urban life. Desperate for some peace, he made the decision to return to his childhood village. He tries to escape the distractions and incessant sounds of the outside world, unaware of the turmoil of mental noises developing within himself. In the early moments of their new life in the countryside, there seems to be hope. Liv, with a great love for cooking, begins to take steps toward her dream of starting a catering service. The birth of Julius brings a wave of joy, and the family adapts to a tranquil and quiet routine. However, soon the silence begins to break. Julius cries incessantly, especially at night, and Matthias constantly finds himself getting up to try to soothe him. As the days go by, the relentless crying starts to deeply affect him, causing emotional weariness. Even when the baby finally sleeps, Matthias is haunted by echoes of phantom cries in his ears. These invasive sounds arise, provoking a growing pressure in his mind, but he insists on not sharing this burden with Liv. Liv's brother Tima visits frequently, bringing a comforting atmosphere to the home. During one of these visits, he gifts Liv a thoughtful gesture, quickly lifting her spirits. Yet beneath the surface of daily life, tension grows, especially in Matthias, who continues to struggle to control the noise that seems uncontrollable. A few days later, while at home, Matthias and Liv notice an elderly man standing silently by the lake. When the camera focuses in, we realize it is Paul, Matthias's father, who has come from a nearby nursing home. Paul's mental health is fragile and deteriorating, leading him to struggle with memory and confusion about his surroundings. Upon seeing his father, Matthias and Liv rush outside and try to communicate with him. During the conversation, Paul repeatedly mentions a woman named Michelle, nostalgically recalling how much she loved the lake. He states that he dug the lake himself for her as a romantic gesture. Liv is confused, as until that moment she knew very little about Matthias's mother. It becomes clear that Michelle, the woman from the opening scene, was Paul's wife and Matthias's mother, and that she committed suicide in that same lake. After a conversation with Paul, Matthias decides to accompany him back to the nursing home. Along the way, Paul continues to talk, repeating that he knows every path and every stone they pass, as if the memory of the place is still vivid for him. Unexpectedly, Paul stops in front of an old abandoned building, which turns out to be a long-forgotten factory. He stands in silence for a moment, before confiding in Matthias that an accident occurred there, but that no one ever spoke about it, and that many things have been buried over the years. His words, though unclear, leave a lasting impression on Matthias, casting a mystery that awaits to be unraveled. Upon returning home, Matthias initially does not think much of it, but the image of the factory lingers in his mind. When he walks by the factory again, on foot, he notices a group of strangers entering through a side entrance. Curious, he decides to take a quick photo and posts it on social media, asking his followers if they would like him to investigate the place further. The response is quite positive and enthusiastic. That night, feeling motivated, Matthias begins his research on the factory. He discovers that the facility has been closed for years, and that his father, Paul, worked there in the past. However, the reasons for the factory's closure remain a mystery. There are no official reports or explanations about what really happened, and everything is forgotten. This silence only intensifies Matthias's curiosity. He is determined to uncover the truth of what really occurred. On the same day, Liv visits the local market to arrange her business cards, intending to start her own food business. While exploring the options, she meets Brenda, the shop owner. Brenda recognizes her immediately, and shows familiarity with Paul and Matthias, suggesting that she is aware of the family's complicated past. Liv confesses that she doesn't know much about Matthias's family history. Brenda reveals that she was friends with Michelle, Matthias's mother, for a time, but over time, Michelle distanced herself and cut off contact. Brenda mentions this in a way that conveys sadness, hinting that something tragic occurred. Simultaneously, Matthias becomes progressively obsessed with the factory. Every waking moment is consumed by this new passion. He convinces himself that there must be deaths related to that place, and that the truth has somehow been buried. Matthias discovers that there were dangerous chemical leaks from the factory, which caused respiratory issues and skin diseases in the surrounding community, leading the population to believe that the factory must have been closed due to these serious concerns. He is convinced this is the reason no one talks about the place, and why it was shut down. Liv, in turn, becomes increasingly worried about her partner's new obsession. Trying to protect Matthias, she gently suggests he redirect his focus to something else, perhaps taking a break from this investigation. However, Matthias insists that his father wants him to uncover the hidden truth, and Liv, despite her worries, decides to be supportive and not pressure him further. Matthias then shares his theories with Timma, who eventually agrees to accompany him on a visit to the factory. Together, they explore the location, and within the factory, Matthias finds an old logbook, as well as the decomposing body of an animal. These discoveries only solidify his suspicions about what happened there. Something threatening occurred and has been kept a secret. Upon returning home, Matthias begins to feel that something is wrong within his own house. Every time he goes down to the basement, he senses a strange presence, as if something is hidden beneath the floor. Meanwhile, Julius continues to cry, and Matthias still hears phantom screams, even in moments of silence in the house. The ongoing pressure of this noise begins to unravel his sanity, increasing his levels of irritability and aggression. Small things start to annoy him to an unbearable level, and arguments between him and Liv become frequent. In the confusion, Liv feels lost and frightened. She cannot understand what is happening to the man she once knew. The truth, however, is that Matthias is slowly slipping into madness. Desperate for answers, Liv decides to visit Brenda once again, where she ends up hearing the full story. Years ago, when Matthias was still a baby, Michelle attempted to drown herself and her son in an act of desperation. Paul arrived in time to save Matthias, but was unable to save Michelle. Since then, Matthias's life has not been the same, as he grew up without maternal love, and Paul never recovered, sinking into his own mental instability. Now, Liv begins to wonder if the same dark shadow that affected Michelle is somehow returning to Matthias. On any given day, while Matthias is home alone, he hears strange noises coming from the basement. Driven by curiosity and a sense of unease, he descends the stairs, and what he sees leaves him completely paralyzed. He is certain the floor is breathing. Whether this is reality or another hallucination, we do not know yet, but the sight deeply disturbs him. With each passing day, Matthias becomes more and more obsessed with the factory question and begins to visit Paul frequently in search of any hidden truth he might remember. When he asks his father about a map of the area, Paul suggests that he may find one in the attic of the old house. That night, Matthias rummages through dusty boxes and indeed discovers a blueprint of the factory. He brings it back to Paul, who carefully guides him through every detail of the layout, while Liv watches anxiously. Matthias's behavior becomes increasingly erratic. He dedicates himself to studying the map, watching videos about the factory's history, and reviewing old records. In the meantime, Liv grows more and more worried, feeling that Matthias is drifting away from her. She tries to talk, but he completely ignores her, diving even deeper into his research. When the situation reaches its climax, Matthias begins to have visions. He sees ghostly figures that he believes to be the forgotten victims of the factory. Based on his research, he is convinced that at least 15 people died at that site, and that the truth has never been revealed. From that moment on, Matthias becomes obsessed with the idea of exposing everything, but the weight of this quest begins to oppress his mind. Even common sounds become torturous for him. One day, when Paul is innocently eating, the sound of cutlery and his father's chewing transforms into unbearable torture. Matthias explodes in frustration and returns home. Later that same day, he explodes again, this time during dinner, throwing food and yelling at Liv. Shocked by the sudden outburst of rage, Liv takes Julius and places him next to Matthias before leaving the house to stay with a friend. Alone and unstable, Matthias's mind destabilizes even further. That night, Julius's cries echo throughout the house, and everything transforms into a whirlwind of confusion. The baby's cries resonate in his head, growing until they become the only thing he can hear. His perception distorts. The light still shines, but everything becomes increasingly chaotic. Matthias finds himself paralyzed amid this internal disorder, battling against the demons that haunt him. That same night, Liv returns home and finds Matthias sitting silently on the stairs, with tears streaming down his face. She wraps her arms around him, trying to connect with the part of Matthias that remains. In that moment, she realizes how far the situation has evolved and how serious his condition has become. Feeling that she cannot handle this alone, Liv calls Tima. Together, they try to talk to Matthias, gently asking if there's anything bothering him, if there is something he needs to share. But Matthias remains silent until in a moment of frustration, he bursts out in anger, yelling for Tima to leave. In the following days, Matthias becomes completely absorbed in his investigation. He regularly publishes videos about the factory, convinced that he is about to discover something monumental, while his mind is so fixated that there is no remaining space for anything else, not even for his family. Tima, worried about the situation, begins to observe everything more closely. Matthias's instability seems to grow with each new video published. Then, on a fateful day, things take a turn in public. While Liv is out, Matthias records a new video, but the incessant crying of Julius, echoing in the background, seems to bother him not at all. Instead of seeking comfort from his son, Matthias crumbles to the floor in despair, thrashing around in confusion and frustration. His followers watch the breakdown in real time, some horrified by the scene while others immediately unfollow him. Tima, alarmed, promptly alerts Liv. The next day, Matthias, determined to uncover the dark truth consuming him, returns to the factory alone. As soon as he enters, the silence that envelops him feels oppressive. He hears footsteps behind him and, consumed by panic, believes someone is trying to attack him. Without a second thought, he strikes out at the approaching figure, only to realize, too late, that it was Tima. Injured and unconscious, Tima collapses to the ground. Matthias, stunned and terrified, flees home without revealing anything to anyone. At home, Matthias acts as if nothing happened. He dares to cook dinner, but the food becomes inedible, yet another sign of his growing disconnection from reality. Meanwhile, Liv finds Paul at the nursing home. When he sees her dressed in one of Michelle's old dresses, he confuses her with his deceased wife and bursts into tears, apologizing for not having been able to save her, but claiming to have saved Matthias. Liv, shaken by the entire situation, asks to see Michelle's medical records. At that moment, everything becomes clear. Michelle suffered from severe mental illness, heard voices, and ultimately was led to take her own life, almost taking Matthias with her. She believed that drowning was the only way to escape the noise. Now Liv realizes that Matthias may have inherited that same condition. The hallucinations, paranoia, and obsession with the factory are evidence of this. It was never about the factory, but rather about something that has always been inside him. Although Paul mentioned the factory in a confused manner, he had no idea Matthias would take it so seriously. Understanding how dangerous things have become, Liv rushes home. When she arrives, she confronts an alarming scene. Matthias has broken through the basement floor. A pipe has burst, and water is leaking everywhere. He is completely lost in his delusions, convinced that there are bodies buried beneath the floor, that he must save them. Liv pleads for him to stop, but he does not listen. Like Michelle, Matthias seems ready to surrender to the water. Just in time, Paul arrives and manages to pull his son to safety. Later, Tima is also found and rescued. In the final scenes, we see Matthias beginning psychiatric treatment. He sits in silence, occasionally looking at the lake, the same one that symbolizes the beginning of all pain. Liv and Julius remain by his side, a small family still fighting to stay united in the face of all adversities. And thus the film ends.